which meant we did more praying, we did more seeking God, we did more acknowledging Christ and the like, all dealing with godly values and so forth. And God rewarded us with something that essentially led to the eradication, or at least rendering a lot of these diseases that were major impacts on the population to almost a thing of the past, where some people haven't even heard of these diseases. That's because our focus was on God and Christ, and everything that we did was lined up according to His Word. Today, however, within the past 40 some odd years or so, this nation has changed. We have started down a path of, I want what I want. I don't care what I have to do to get it, just as long as I get what I want. And unfortunately, our problems have started to catch up with us in this aspect. Things that we used to think were of the past are starting to make starting to return again, and they're returning with a vengeance, if you will. We look at a lot of things like viruses and so forth that once we thought were eradicated are coming back, but the same medications and things that we used to use to get rid of these things, all these viruses and so forth, are not working. And so what happens is we're in a battle now, and that battle is how to eradicate something. And everybody's running around saying, well, we need to do this and we need to do that. Well, fine, do your scientific research and so forth. But here is where our problem comes in, and that is, first of all, science says the promises of stem cell research to deal with diseases and all of these other disabilities and so forth show great promise. So there's no guarantee that if stem cell research goes on, whether or not there's going to be 100% cure or an eradication of the diseases that the scientists are claiming will be the cure. But from the standpoint of embryonic stem cell research, we are dealing with life that is attached to what we would call unborn children. And the idea of, since these are supposed to be stem cells, now I don't know all of that much about the scientific point of view, but I can tell you this: when you understand what God has said is right and wrong, you will find out that these diseases and so forth that we are suffering today, you might find a cure through science. But the question is, why do we even have to go down that route in the first place? My point being is this: if you go to the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy chapter 28, and you read scriptures, the scriptures starting at verse 1, which essentially says, where God is telling the people, if you are follow my laws and my rules and my directions, that you will basically, to condense it all into one. In fact, I'll use another scripture. The scripture that I want to use, I'm gonna post it. I haven't looked it up right now, but God says, if you will be willing and obedient, you will eat the good of the land, or you will prosper, or you will be in a position where everything that's good will come your way. Now, notice, he says, if you are willing and obedient, cancer, polio, diabetes, high blood pressure, coronary diseases, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, these are not the good of the land. These are not the good things in life. On the other hand, they are the curses of our disobedience to God. In other words, what I'm saying is this: if we were more in line with what God has to say about what is right and what is wrong, we would have no need for stem cell research on any level. You see, we want to settle for having our cake and eating it too. It's like, I want to continue in my ungodly ways, but when my ungodly ways cause me to suffer, then I look to somebody else to find a way to fix my suffering and make my suffering go away, so I can still continue in my ungodly ways. That is the whole focus of what is wrong with us today. As I said, instead of us having to deal with all the myriad of diseases and disabilities and financial problems and losses of jobs and so forth, we always tend to look to a man, to usually a politician or a president, to come in and don't tell us about the fact that we're living in sin, or that we're doing this wrong, or we're doing that wrong, and God's not pleased with it. Just fix the problem so that I can continue in my ways and not have to suffer for it. And usually the only solution that will come up when you are not seeking God comes from one other source, and that is the devil. The devil, he'll come up with a whole lot of things to give you the idea that he can fix your problem. But like the old movies used to say, and sometimes we hear a lot of people talk about it from this standpoint, you have to sell your soul to the devil to get him to do anything that you want done. And then at the end, when all is said and done, he's going to come back to claim your soul at some point in time. Stem cell research, even though I say the total cure for any problem that we have is Jesus Christ. So you don't need to have to even deal with trying to figure out how to get a problem solved if you've got Christ backing you up. If you seek Christ and what he has to say, he'll give you the solution or heal you himself if you will put your faith and trust in him. But today, unlike back in the 50s and the 40s and so forth, when we had all of these other diseases that God had been eradicated, it was because we had a conscience of we don't want to do anything that God would disapprove of. That's because our churches, our pastors of our churches, the leaders in our communities stood up for what was right in God's eyes. Today we don't have that. What we have is preachers and pastors that stand up and preach and say and do things that are popular not in God's eyes but in man's eyes, or that are in their particular community's eyes. The idea of saying something against a black leader is something that a lot of people today say you just don't do that. Well, if you just don't do that, and that black leader, a man of God supposedly, is not doing what he's supposed to be doing, if nobody says anything about it, then that allows that man and those that follow him to continue down a path of destruction. And the worse things get, the more they depend on this man, and this man is still telling them the wrong thing, and they just keep on getting worse. And then he tells them the reason why things are getting worse is because of those people over there, or these people over here, or the Republicans, or George Bush, or Ronald Reagan, or Rush Limbaugh, or whoever it is an excuse to defer or deflect blame from themselves and put it on somebody else, so that you can go out and think that the solution to your problem is to get rid of these people that are trying to tell you that you're going down the wrong path. So you get rid of them, and what happens? Your situation continues to get worse. At some point in time, and we might basically be reaching that point in time when people are going to start waking up and saying, hey, wait a minute, we've gotten rid of everybody else and the problem is still getting worse. And then they're going to say, well, then the problem has got to be you.